turned therapist. Our focus in these episodes is to humanize the athlete experience beyond the lines of their arena. In this podcast, we will explore the whole athlete, highlighting the mental, emotional, and social aspects of their journey. Hey everyone, I'm Lily.
And I'm Amelia.
And today we are going to talk a little bit about what's been over at least all of my For You pages and Instagram feeds and all of that, but the Olympics, and then more specifically, how the Olympics this year is kind of shining light on athletes' mental health and humanizing athletes and that sort of whole thing, which is something that's really near and dear to my heart. And I love it. And I love talking about it. So I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, I am not athletic in the least, unless you count like Pee Wee softball and church league basketball. But the Olympics became super important to me in 2021. And I also think, COVID played into that. It was delayed. It also brought so many people together in a time where there was a lot of grief. But seeing Simone Biles step down, admit what was going on, kind of become a huge advocate for mental health, I think really humanized the experience of watching the Olympics, because it's so easy to idolize these individuals. Be like, oh my goodness, they're serving their country. They're so cool. They're doing all these things. You see them in commercials, drinking Gatorade, and it's oh, they're so cool. But you kind of forget that they're also human and they're experiencing these things that we experience too. And having someone advocate on that level felt so important to me. And now I'm so invested in the Olympics. It's kind of embarrassing.
No, it's definitely not embarrassing. I don't think you're alone in that. I think a lot of people are bought in on this, which is great because I think it's something that a lot of people have been doing the work or trying to do the work for a super long time. But it's been super awesome to see people with a bigger platform and more of a voice be able to hop on and start doing this work as well. I know it's super energizing and sort of just adds life to the whole situation, especially what we do here at Millennium too, especially with the athlete wellness division. I also think it's important to point out, yes, Simone had a tough run at the Tokyo Olympics. Then also dealing with that, she also decided to take on the weight of then having this sort of become her thing. She was also wanted to do the advocacy, as well as she is fully recovering from this complete case of the twisties, mental hurdle, acknowledging her past, acknowledging everything, just sort of starting this therapy individual work for herself, but then also being because I don't have already so much pressure and weight on me, I'm also now going to become the face of literally getting mental health support for athletes all around the world.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who had prior spoken out about their mental health, their voices kind of got elevated and magnified because of her. Not that they hadn't been speaking out, but because she kind of put words to their thoughts, because a lot of it was mental performance. And I know that Apollo Ono, who is an Olympic skater, kind of talked about that when he was competing 15 years ago, the conversation about mental health among athletes was super different than it is today. He said in an interview that, to be completely honest, we didn't even know what mental health meant. He said that the words really were just circling around mental performance, that they focused a lot of their time about how they were performing, not necessarily what was happening on the inside. And so mental performance, you think, oh, going out there, doing your thing. But it was Simone kind of put it as, no, there's so much more going on. She, I think, really elevated the whole experience. And I say that as someone who's not an athlete. You can probably speak to that more.
Yeah, I was going to jump in. I playing basketball 110%. If there was stuff going on outside of practice or a game or a tournament, stuff going on in my personal life, my family life, my romantic life, literally school, think of all the things that one person is doing in a day, probably do 55 different things in a day, and one of them just being showing up to practice. So, I mean, and for some people, and oftentimes sport is a release, and it's okay, I'm going to lock in here because I'm not going to be dealing with the outside world for the next 2 hours. And that's amazing. And I still cherish the moments when that's the case too, because sometimes it's an outlet, but other times it's whoa, that stuff decided to come into the locker room with me. And now I'm going to still have to show up for myself, for my teammates, for my coaches, for all of these things when there's literally everything else on my mind. So I think she did a really good job of sort of explaining that, because I think, like you said in the past, it kind of just got put under this umbrella of like mental health and performance.
Yeah.
Like, what can we say or do to allow us to jump higher, run faster, hit this mark, make this play, XYZ, whatever it may be. But yeah, I think we sort of hit it nail on the head with her. She was really able to take the performance part out of it and genuinely just be like, mental health because of you and a person and what you're experiencing and how you're experiencing life, or what you may have experienced and haven't processed, and all the million things that I think everyone talks about in therapy when they do go to therapy. Yeah. So it's literally like she's showing up in the therapy room as a person and not an athlete, which I think is huge.
That's so crazy to me, thinking about like when I go on like a walk or when I go work out or when I do something, a lot of times it's me kind of in my head in my own little therapy dialogue. Like I'm thinking about the 55 things I did that day, and I'm like trying to process that in that space. So the idea of athletes having to consciously silence that when going into practice or into a game or into a performance, that just feels so difficult to me. I can't put myself in that mindset. And to do that on the highest stage possible at the Olympics seems almost impossible.
Especially, I mean, what is coming up for me now is like, when playing that sport is also your job.
Yeah.
So I was thinking of it more as like when I was in high school and college, like obviously it was a really huge, important part of my life, but I had so many other things going for me, like internships or classes or family things to attend, like all these other things, which these athletes also have as well. But I'm like, when thinking about Simone, like when she's there, like it's not like, oh, this is a great time I can kind of shut everything off and go do what I love. And I do think, and now that we're seeing in these Olympics and in these interviews and all these TikToks that I'm seeing and all this stuff, is she really has been able in that off time to connect back to like why she's doing it. Something that she's been saying a lot, or I've been watching the Netflix documentary.
Yeah, so
Miles
good.
Rising. Highly recommend if you haven't watched it. But something that she kind of keeps coming back to on there is she's doing it this time out of her own like volition and want and desire to go back and do this. Like, no one else was telling her to do this. I think 27 she is now, maybe something along those lines, mid to late 20s. And she's kind of like, this time around, like I'm doing it for myself. And I even saw on an interview the other day, someone was asking like, what is LA? Like, are you going to be back for LA in 2028 or whatever it may be? And she was like, honestly, never say never. And she was beaming literally from ear to ear. And she was like, I don't know. Like, I'm just going to see how I feel there, check in, do what's right for me, like recover, see where I'm at. Like, I'm not like her presence and just her aura is very like, I'm back doing what I love with like this ability to connect to why she's still doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think like, again, the fact that she can do that while so many people, I mean, like she's been trending on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram for the last like 3 weeks. Like she has been.
She's Taylor Swift level now.
No, she is. She's so relevant. And like when you are an athlete, and I think especially an athlete in the United States, we as just patrons who like to watch the sport really do put these athletes on a pedestal and then throw tomatoes at them. Like we have such a habit of looking at them and then looking at their faults and criticizing them for those faults. And I've seen some people like laugh at that, like me eating Oreos, like watching the Olympics,
like
judging.
I could do that.
Yeah. Like, and I have said that. Like I simply can't. But like, why is it our tendency to do that and to like consciously bring people down who are just doing their very best and trying to find joy in something that they're not only good at, but they love?
Yeah. I mean, I think that poses a really good question as to why, like, as a whole, for some, I think it's because you're so bought in to that person as a fan as well. So it's like, then as a fan, it's grappling with like, I want this so much for them. And then it's like, oh, maybe like not really knowing what to do with that reaction of them maybe doing something wrong or not performing as well. Or like you put all your eggs in this one basket and they're like rooting for this person. And then like, so it's just like, talk a little bit about perspective taking.
Yeah.
Imagine being in that person's shoes.
Yes.
Also, like, I mean, with the Olympics is wild. I mean, I know there's so many other competitions, but like this is every 4 years. Like, I think back to when I was training in one season and I'm like, all right, ultimate end goal, like on paper is to go and win state in like high school was a thing that's coming up for me. imagine having your end goal be out 4 years from one time. Like that is a lot of time with one goal. And I think Thomas, when we were talking on a podcast a few weeks ago, is like really this importance of chopping up your goals into like smaller little wins that you can take and put into your bucket and like allow to fill your cup. Because if you prioritize one thing and that one thing is either far out or I don't know, you're putting all of your energy into this one thing, it's really, really hard to fall in love with the process while you're doing it. Yeah, Thomas and I were talking about this in injury recovery. Like, if your main ultimate end all be all goal is to get back on the court to even where you just were, or even better to where when you stopped, you're not going to be okay with the one day that you wake up and it doesn't hurt. Your injury doesn't hurt. You're not going to be okay with the one day that you decided to move from the bike to the treadmill. Like, that is a huge, huge, huge win. But if you're so far away from celebrating those small wins because you're so locked in on this one main goal, it's really, really easy to look over and glaze over those small things. So I think that was like a long-winded way of saying like, it's hard for these people to stay in the present moment and like celebrate these smaller wins when this like huge thing, especially I think for gymnastics, when talking about gymnastics, I know I can even admit, like, I probably don't pay too much attention to gymnastics other when it's on the Olympics. And I think a lot of people would probably be in that camp with me. But like, just reminding that it's hard. Like, this stage is where they are getting all this recognition, but there's also so much else, so many other things that go into it.
Yeah. And as a lifelong like fan, someone who like, again, has never played a sport a day in their life, I've been so thankful for documentaries like Simone's or like Hard Knocks on HBO or all these other ways that athletes are kind of getting out there and humanizing themselves. And you can kind of see that. And I think that that then plays back to the ways that we can criticize them, because it becomes harder to criticize someone when you like realize they're also human. And I've been really appreciative. I mean, of course, the Hard Knocks with the Chicago Bears right now has been so fun to watch. And part of that is Jonathan Owens getting to watch Simone.
Yes, get it from both sides.
Exactly.
We love it.
But it's also like you see that, oh, this is a husband who's proud of his wife, who's like watching her do his job. Like, it's a crazy, amazing job, but also it humanizes him in the process too. And I think maybe more Americans, more just people around the world need to admire and also understand that this is a human.
Yeah, I think also like outside of athletes as well. I mean, I would probably consider multiple like performers also athletes, like Taylor Swift's stamina and like doing all of that is like wild. But I'm also thinking in general, just think how wide what you're saying, like where it also applies to. Like, think of any other documentary that you've watched that isn't about an athlete. So I'm going to like the country singer Jelly Roll. I don't know if you know him, but like that documentary is coming up for me, or like all these, there was like a Lady Gaga documentary, a Selena Gomez, like the Pink documentary. Like, and like, why do we love these documentaries so much? Exactly what you're saying, because we're seeing the human side of this person that we are so obsessed with and want to be. And like, I wish I had their life, all these things. It's so, so, so easy to forget that they're just like us. And I know that's silly, but it's like, their stars are just like us. Like, they're going to the grocery store, like whatever. But it's super, super, super easy to forget that, especially in this world of social media and like all this media and things that you're consuming when you're just constantly comparing yourself to others too.
Yeah. And I think too, like, again, going back to the Olympics, they've made such huge strides in taking care of their athletes since Simone has spoken out. And I know that Jessica Bartley, the senior director for psychological services for the US Olympics and the Paralympic Committee, she admitted, like, we're doing better, but we have to do better, because it's not just about the mental preparation for what's going on. It's also what's happening after. Like, several athletes have been coming up to her saying, I don't know if I'm ready to give it up. And there's like, after being on such a global stage and then going home, there has to be some kind of like depressive episode that happened. Like, you are on such a high.
Totally. I think that goes like, whether that be like, okay, this was my last Olympics or this was my last big competition and I'm like going to retire from this sport. That's one completely other thing. And then the other thing again is pointing back to, we just put so much effort into one thing and it's gone now. And it's like, okay, I'm going to give myself some grace. Like, I just did an amazing thing. So like maybe I'll give myself a few
Yeah.
weeks off, and I hope that athletes do that because rest and recovery is like super, super important.
Yeah, I saw Simone tweeting that. She's like, I just took a massive nap. And I was
Yeah.
like, go girl.
Yes. Or like I know, I hope she like can go do a little Europe trip now
Yeah.
and just like chill. But yeah, I think that's other it's also like finding that motivation once you like are on that high and it's like, oh, okay, so like that was great, but now what do I do? And
Yeah.
it's sort of just navigating that. And I think that's when mental health and support can really like come into play.
And I think that that's relevant for high schoolers who just won state or who are graduating and not playing in college or college athletes who are going into the real world. Like this stuff is really important. And I'm really appreciative that on this global stage, people are talking about it. And I think not even from like a therapist perspective, but just from like a human perspective, I think giving those who have a platform a place to speak out in ways that positively affect others is so necessary and often doesn't happen.
Yeah. I think also pointing to that, like just going off of that as well, like so many other athletes, very similar stature of Simone Biles, are so appreciative of what she's been doing because they haven't been able to get to that point where they're ready to be like, whoa, this is a lot. What I'm carrying is heavy. There's so much pressure. There's these time demands, all these other things. Like, I know, like people, and it's also for me as like an athlete, seeing the other athletes of that stature like all come together is like honestly so awesome and like so beautiful. Like, when the like all the NBA guys, so the USA team was there, like supporting the women's gymnastics, like, and they all were videotaping it. Their reactions were like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like no way!" Like that's so cool. Like people literally had their like Steph Curry had his like glasses on, and he was like, "Whoa, did she just do that?" Like all of these things,
Yeah.
but just seeing that, and I also think for women's
I was
sports,
about to say elevating women. That's
yes,
so great.
is awesome. So seeing that, but then as always, women supporting women has been like huge,
So fun to
especially this
watch.
Olympics. I think that's definitely my news cycle too. I hope it's everyone else's news cycle.
It's partly mine, but also, yeah, I want it to be other people's.
But it's amazing to sort of see that. And like people really are just appreciative of what she has done for athletes and mental health, which is great to see because like it's hard to get there.
Yeah, and I think more people are becoming comfortable. I've even seen Alona Mar, who's seen the rugby player, and she isn't necessarily talking about like anxiety and depression, but she is talking about like body image and eating disorders. And like, I think once people have gotten the language, they become more comfortable with expressing it. And I just, yeah, I think it's fundamentally so important for the human experience, but also for the fan experience.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, what it's just going to make fans feel more connected at the end of the day, you know? And I think that's something I know we've talked about this before, but like that was a huge thing that drew me to Millennium was like having this athlete wellness division and like part of Millennium and being around like-minded people who are like really able to understand this experience and who are also able to then sort of like cultivate their work and their career around then going back and helping these people, which is great. And like, yeah, we are talking about it right now, like literally the biggest stage in the world, but like I think it starts pretty young too. Like, because like, and I am not even like, and I say athlete wellness, but it's like whole person wellness at the end of the day. Like, that's what it is. But I think what Millennium has and what we talk about often is like, a lot of us have had that experience as being an athlete. So we're able to help with like, okay, like I understand, like this is what I went through. I see how you like draw those parallels to one another. But I do think, yeah, like even like some teams these days, like grade school is revving up and kids are just like, whoa. Like some teams like will already have a college on their like some players will have a college like on their mood board when they're in like seventh grade and they're gonna be again holding on to that one long time like far out goal is gonna like become detrimental at some point. So I'm super happy to be at a place like Millennium that offers the like time and energy to support younger athletes too.
Yeah. It's also been so cool as someone like literally do not know anything about sports other than watching them.
You also need to cut yourself some slack
Okay.
because you do.
But like, I think that this is such an area where we have been, at least like the mental health world has kind of put it on the back burner. And Millennium has really shown like athletes are people who experience human emotions on a grander scale sometimes because people are watching them. And I think hearing the perspective of colleagues or the perspective of, you know, you see so many athletes and you see so many teams as a whole, hearing what you're getting and like me being able to take that into like couples counseling or take that into recovery counseling. Like, this is so needed in so many areas. And I've been really appreciative of Millennium's way of not only having the athlete wellness division, but having the athlete wellness division teach everyone else here.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that goes the other way around too. Like, it's all connected. That's why I hate to be over here and like separating athletes out, because that's also exactly what we're not trying to do. We're trying to like add the human relationship or like aspect of themselves back into. But like, yeah, a lot of the clients who I work with who wouldn't declare themselves as athletes also like motivation to work out and like different things. Like it's all like it's
there.
hobbies, it's values, it's things that you love. Like it's really like a both and thing, which I think has been something that I've kind of learned coming into this role too, because I was so not like as an athlete, maybe a little bit perfectionist and some like all or none thinking, but it's been super eye-opening to sort of like all collaboratively work on these things together, which I think in hindsight is only gonna like help me support people.
Yeah. And that's the goal.
Yeah, right?